Hey everybody, welcome back into 2 on OSU. As always, I'm joined by my identical twin and beat reporter Sam Hutchins. A lot to talk about today, including a huge win for the Cowboys that kind of breathed some life back into a season that was quickly heading to life support. But before we get into all the football talk, we want to thank some of our great sponsors for supporting 2 on OSU. And we start out with MidFirst Bank, Laserlight Skin Clinic, the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum, Oklahoma Ford Dealers, and Fire Lake Casino. We also want to remind all of our viewers and listeners to drive into your best in Oklahoma Ford Dealers today for the best deals on Ford's full lineup of trucks and SUVs. Remember, Ford is the best in Oklahoma. Sam, what's going on?
Well, I thought that was a great line from you, Ben. The win turned life support into a little life for Oklahoma State, and the Cowboys desperately needed a win against Kansas State. Not even in terms of, if you lose your first 2 Big 12 games, then you're destined to have some awful season and you can't ever recover from that. But it just felt like getting a win, moving to 1-1 in Big 12 play, and ending what was a 2-game losing streak. It felt like that was huge for morale. I mean, if you saw Twitter post-game, Mike Gundy is breaking out his dance moves that are reserved for big games. So it really did feel like the Cowboys got a big win, and it was an upset win. But there's just something about Mike Gundy as a home dog that he really excels at. And it felt, Ben, a little bit like one of those kind of classic Gundy performances where you don't exactly know where the points are going to come from or how Oklahoma State's going to win. But, I mean, you called it on the podcast. I sure didn't, but you called it, Ben. Oklahoma State would win. So the win felt maybe coaching influenced. We've heard these last few weeks about how, Gundy will go up to the podium and say, I got out coached. This week it felt like the Cowboys had the answers. They were doing trick plays. They were scheming guys open and making just enough plays to come out with a win that sets Oklahoma State, hey, people are doing the math. Control your own destiny. You got momentum, so who knows? But certainly more of there's life in this season, no doubt.
I know the Cowboys, if they would have lost that game, they would have gone and dipped below 500 for the first time since 2014, which really kind of shows, you hate to say your back is against the wall in, week 5, but gosh, it really felt like that. And, I wasn't surprised to see Mike Gundy pull out one of these wins that he's been known for. I think you read the tweet or showed it to me, Sam. Brett McMurphy talked about OSU as a home dog. I mean, I don't remember the exact
Mike
numbers.
Gundy's won 8 of his last 9 games as a home underdog.
Yeah,
that's
outright.
Crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to West Virginia and Texas that one year, and just continues. And they're going to be a home dog again next week against KU, which is certainly something to think about. But there was a lot of things that kind of went into this win. You talked about coaching. I want to ask about, what do you think the biggest factor was? Was it the creative offense? The defense finally finding a way to get some turnovers? What did you feel like was the biggest factor in the win?
So I think the offensive line played well. And that was the first thing that Mike Gundy hammered in his Monday press conference was the offensive line. They played well. And we'd written about that, Ben. I did a story on Khalid Duke and Kansas State's fearsome defensive line that decimated Oklahoma State in Manhattan last year. But it was the Cowboys who were able to run the ball, who were able to protect Alan Bowman and run workable offense through that. It all starts up front. So that was a big performance from those guys up front. And it's kind of something that PFF backs up. Dalton Cooper played especially well, grading out in the advanced analytics. So, yeah, when you protect Alan Bowman, when you get Ollie Gordon, Jaden Nixon, Elijah Collins holes to run through, good things can happen for Oklahoma State. And to me, that was maybe one of the big surprises of the year. If you look at what the offensive line had done up to that point, kind of viewed as a group that had struggled generally overall. And to go and turn around and have a big performance like that at Kansas State, Bowman was not sacked. So to protect him and create holes for Ollie Gordon and company, big time by the offensive line.
Sam, you can forget sacks. Alan Bowman wasn't hit by Kansas State's pass rush. There were no quarterback hits registered by Pro Football Focus. And yeah, it was obvious that you can just watch with your own two eyes. Yes, like Oklahoma State's offensive line protected Bowman a lot better. It was the highest grade OSU's received in any area this season. Is their pass protection grade against Kansas State? So certainly, I think that has to be one of the biggest reasons why. I mean, it didn't automatically mean that Alan Bowman had great numbers. His numbers weren't up from that. But Mike Gundy said it allowed the Cowboys to stay balanced. It allowed the run game to play. Kansas State couldn't put a bunch of guys in the box and stop Ollie Gordon. So there's a lot of things that went into keeping the offense balanced and going into the win.
Yeah, and again, just adding the context to that, Kansas State's a really good defensive team, especially rush defense. They were, I think, top 5 in the nation in yards allowed per rush and top 6 in the nation in rushing yards allowed per game. So the Wildcats, they've been shutting teams down on that front. So for the Cowboys to keep their quarterback upright and rush the ball well, very impressive and honestly very surprising. But Ben, I talked with Casey Dunn post game, of course, and he was the guy who was saying, it could have been worse. The Cowboys could have been up 2-3 scores after halftime. I think Dunn used the term, we could have been coasting in if not for all the red zone woes. But, I mean, the Cowboys moved the ball great in between the 20s and then attempted 6 field goals, which was an Oklahoma State record to attempt 6 field goals. Alex Hale connected on 5 of them to keep at least Oklahoma State scoring points. But, Ben, if the Cowboys could have converted on a red zone possession or two, this game could have been a lot different.
I know. I mean, I think the Cowboys were one of the best red zone teams in the nation coming into the game. They'd really converted on a lot of those touchdown chances. They weren't getting down there much, but they were really converting when they did. And of course, on Friday we saw them get down there a bunch and just not convert.
It was the inverse. OSU had 11 red zone trips coming into this game, Ben. They scored touchdowns on 9 of them, and the other 2 were field goals. So they'd scored on all 11 and mostly touchdowns, which was behind Florida State and Colorado, I think, for number 3 nationally. I had that in a story I wrote on game day too. So kind of an extreme inverse to flip that on its head. And Gundy would be the first to tell you post-game, he said it, that's not a sustainable strategy for winning, is kicking 6 field goals and, trading 7 for 3 every time. But it was enough to suffice for Oklahoma State. So I guess shout out, credit Alex Hale for a big game where his only attempt, another chip shot, was blocked.
Yeah, it's going to be something to watch, how the Cowboys do in the red zone against the Jayhawks, because they were so good. And then we were asking all the questions today. What happened in the red zone? And Mike was pretty straightforward. He said they kicked our ass. I mean, and he said that on Saturday too, or on Friday too. So, I mean, I can't imagine those linemen. Those guys are going to be motivated, I think, to get out there and go kick some Jayhawk butt too. I could certainly see that turning around next week. Sam, another guy who was kicking a lot of butt was Nick Martin, dude. I haven't seen a defensive performance like that. I mean, around here, it was said post game maybe since Malcolm Rodriguez, 17 tackles for Nick Martin. What did you think about his play?
I know early in the year, he was a guy that Pro Football Focus had highlighted. He was one of those guys missing the tackles early in the year. When the Cowboys, it felt like that was the struggle on the defense for 2 or 3 weeks, was they were missing tackles. And then Nick Martin was just flying around yesterday. So I think, Ben, a lot of that could be just being a young guy, getting more experience. And, it really shows it's kind of an exponential leap when you have so little experience. What was that, the 6th game of the year? Compared to the first game of the year looks like. But Nick Martin was all over the place, especially important now that Justin Wright has redshirted out for the year, taking a medical redshirt.
That's right. And the Cowboys were, like Justin Wright, just a guy who has not been able to catch a break since coming to Stillwater. He got hurt on like the 3rd or 4th play of the opener and thought he was done for the year. Of course, I love Justin Wright telling everybody what's going on medically with his tweets. I mean, I wish every college football player was that transparent about it. But Justin Wright, he returned against Iowa State and then got hurt again in the bye week as the Cowboys were ramping back up. So we don't expect Justin Wright to be back the whole year, of course, medically redshirted. But that's not the extent of the injuries, Sam. There was another big one on the Cowboy offense.
That's right. Dejon Stribling out for the year too. I think Mike Gundy, obviously not as transparent as Justin Wright, just said he's got a hand thing. But Stribling was in a cast. When you're a receiver, being in a hard cast, not a good thing. Of course not. So Stribling, he's out for the year too. Ben, that was confirmed, and that's maybe not a name that a ton of Oklahoma State fans know. He kind of popped in a couple games
Of course, dude, they know it. I mean,
in
he's
the
been the
opener.
best guy. Like, if you don't know Stripling by now, what have you been doing?
Well,
I think
but what I'm saying, Ben, is he's transferred and he kind of popped a little bit, but you're waiting for this guy to explode onto the wide receiver one phase. And from what we talked about with Mike Gundy, it kind of seemed like that's what they were expecting, right? So I guess that wasn't the exact right frame of words, but trust me, we would have gotten to know exactly what Dejon Stribling is about. He would have been a huge part of this team, and he's out of the picture, done. So transfer from Wazoo, that's a big loss for Oklahoma State with his injuries, especially if you consider back to even Arlen Bruce. Ben, I know we've had conversations with Mike Gundy about this. Walking off after press conferences, reporters are just trying to get a feel for what Arlen Bruce would have brought to the table. And Bruce, he too would have been a pretty big part of this team that the Cowboys were maybe circling, relying on, projecting in the preseason. So with Stribling's loss and not having Bruce, this wide receiver core definitely looks different from how the Cowboys planned it 6 weeks ago.
yeah. And one of the guys who we've been talking a lot about is Brennan Presley, and kind of how he's been a little absent. We just haven't seen he's not been a super involved piece in the Cowboy offense yet, and maybe it was because Stribling's on the sideline, but he really seemed to get a lot more involved on Friday against K State with the wide receiver pass and all sorts of trick plays. I think there was a reverse in there, and BP ended up catching 4 passes for 40 yards, which might not seem like much, but that's his second biggest output of the year is Brennan Presley for 40 yards. So yeah, without Stribling, I mean, Brennan Presley, we've been talking about it for a while. He's going to have to kind of really step up.
Yeah, and you're right. That's not even a lot for Brennan Presley standards. We've seen what that guy can do. He can go for 150 yards in a game and then have 2 touchdowns. And he's one of those guys, especially in the red zone, Ben, that you look to as a big red zone guy. Put him in the slot, have him run a stick route, an option route, and he'll get open down there in man coverage. But you're right. For this year, it was a better game for Brennan Presley. He had. I'll run it down for you, Ben. He had 1 pass, 2 rushes, 4 catches, and a kick return. So 8 total touches, which was kind of the sweet spot that Mike Gundy indicated. He said today in his press conference that they want to get Brennan 7 or 8 touches a game. And the way that they're doing that is with pre-snap motion, which I think that's been a talking point among just OSU fans in general is, man, good things tend to happen when Brennan Presley's motioning around in the backfield. So Gundy estimated today that Presley was in motion for 20 of 75 plays against Kansas State. And he said it's just easier to scheme up guys to get the ball like that instead of sticking them on the line of scrimmage where defenses can adjust coverage and focus that way. So I guess that's how they're trying to get Brennan involved is pre-snap motion.
Yeah, and I think another interesting part of this is, okay, you have Brennan Presley. We all know what he is, but Rashad Owens, Talon Shetron, Jaden Bray to a certain point. Those guys are also going to become more under the microscope now that there's no WR1 with Stribling out. So it's going to be important. I mean, Rashad Owens got involved on Friday, and we've seen Bray get out there and Shetron too. So who knows? It might be one of those kind of rotations, Sam, where it's not just one guy. It might be, you'll see Owens have a big game and then, Shetron. So I don't think one guy is going to really step up and replace Deshaun Stribling in that aspect. I think it's going to probably be kind of a rotating thing of one of these guys is going to kind of have a good game and then maybe disappear a couple weeks. That's just kind of how I think it's going to go.
If I had to throw out a candidate, I'd say maybe the most likely is Jaden Bray. He's the person I've been most impressed with from that trio of Owens, Shetron, and Bray. But you're right, Ben. They all could break out, and they all have the talent. They're kind of 3 guys that Bray's been here and has been here a little longer than Shetron has, of course, but especially those two, Shetron and Bray, those are two guys that Cowboy fans have been kind of waiting to break out for a little while now. So you're right, Ben. The opportunity's here, and with Alan Bowman, who is the starter moving forward, he's thrown some nice deep balls, especially against Kansas State when he was upright, he wasn't being chased around. I thought Bowman threw some nice deep balls, including ones that weren't caught. But he looked to me, some plays where he gave receivers a chance to break out.
I know. And just to run it down, if you want to think, okay, like, well, what did the Kansas State game look like? Jaden Bray, 4 catches for 77 yards. Rashad Owens, 5 catches for 75. And then Brennan Presley. Josiah Johnson, also a name we shouldn't fail to throw in here. He's a tight end, which is weird to say that he's catching passes at OSU, but he had 4 catches. And I think the thing to note there is he had 2 catches drawn up to him with the scripted plays. With the first drive OSU came out, they were kind of intentionally trying to get Josiah Johnson the ball. And he even got the ball later on a play we're going to talk about on the 2-minute drill. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see kind of who takes on some of that burden.
He did look good. For a second, I was thinking, man, is this going to be the Josiah Johnson game? But overall, if I had to say it was the blank game, I would say it was probably the defense game. Forced all those turnovers, and they were so good. The Cowboys were the ones that pressured Will Howard, got him to make bad decisions. To be honest, Ben, and again, for context, I think it's fair to say Kansas State just didn't play well. Like, aside from what Oklahoma State was doing, I think back to that throw that Will Howard made on the last drive, or what, it wasn't the last drive because Oklahoma State ended up pick-sixing it. Cameron Epps got it. But I think back to that throw where Will Howard, he's not going to make that throw every game, just receiver thought it was a double move. Will Howard threw the out route, and Cam Epps picked it off. He said post-game he couldn't believe Will Howard threw it. So I think it's important to note that, maybe Kansas State just kind of had an off game and Oklahoma State benefited from that. But you're right. That's where the line blurs, because when you play well, your team is your opponent's more likely to have off games. So
yeah, let's get into the 2-minute drill. Sam, we both, I think, been under the buzzer. We both made it these last couple times, and this time we're going to start out talking about the offense and the creativity that it showed. What was your favorite play that Casey Dunn and the Cowboys brought out of the bag of tricks?
Okay, 2 minutes, 4 questions. I'll hop into it. My favorite trick play that Oklahoma State ran, and it's weird, there were multiple options here, so it's crazy. I thought that fake punt was great. Mike Gundy got booed for bringing out the punt team, and he was maybe smiling a little bit on the inside, but they gave it to Elijah Collins. So instead of us running a quarterback sneak, it was pretty much a quarterback sneak with a running back carrying the ball with the element of surprise. So it worked. Collins squirted out to left side, got a few yards. Good play.
I liked the throwback to Alan Bowman, Sam. And when Alan Bowman caught it, that's when I stopped liking the play, because I remarked to myself, it looks like he was in Madden and forgot to hold down the trigger. Yeah. Because he did not have a lot of sprint speed on that play. But I liked the design of it. I liked getting the ball out there. And BP can throw. We've seen that before with Brennan Presley throwing the ball. So I really liked that and thought it was creative.
Okay, last question, Ben. Rank them. A blackout game under a Stillwater sky, an OSU homecoming game, and Bedlam. Best atmosphere.
I think Bedlam is the best atmosphere. It's going to be crazy this year. I think I'll put the blackout at number 2. The fans always surprise me with how well they black out the stands. And 3 is homecoming. It's hit or miss. Last year was KU or a couple years ago was KU in a beatdown, and this year's Cincinnati. Doesn't really do it for me.
I'm with you. I guess that's why we're identical twins. Bedlam at 1, how could you not? The blackout game 2, it's just always a little crazy. They say the night sky is blackest in Stillwater. I remember I joked in the press box, it doesn't matter what city actually has the least light pollution. It's just whichever school does the best job of claiming that title. It's hard to dispute that. So I guess Oklahoma State has that. And homecoming, the main thing going for homecoming is there's a ton of people in there, but Oklahoma State's done a good job of selling things out and doing that on a regular basis. So I'm with you.
Sam, I think if we were running back to the sidelines, we'd be getting chewed out. I don't know if we quite made it in 2 minutes, but we sure gave it our best shot. And as always, we want to thank you for watching the show, listening, following everything on Sellout Crowd. It's all free all the time, which I know is my favorite part about this whole thing. And if it's your first time hearing or watching our show, be sure to subscribe on YouTube or Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you're at. That really helps us continuing to create a lot of stuff like this. And if you like what you hear, do us an even bigger favor and leave a review. That's super helpful and means a lot to us. So thanks for joining us for this edition of 2 on OSU. Sam and I will be back later in the week to preview Oklahoma State's upcoming game against KU. Thanks for joining us.